Welcome to part 2. We are going over my list for the top 25 characters in fiction, well, mostly anime. If you have not yet, go check out part 1 with the 50th through 26th best characters. If you like controversy, you're definitely going to want to do that because I have some very universally respected characters in there and some not so widely enjoyed characters in this video that I have indeed put above them. So without further ado, let's get into it. Number 25. Thorfin Karlsefni from Vinland Saga. Another character I can't talk about in depth because of spoilers. Vinland Saga is a story about Vikings, and in this environment, violence is so integral to their society that it is impossible to not share these values in some way. However, Thorfinn's father, once an esteemed warrior, completely rejects violence, wishes to live a peaceful life, and wishes for his son to have a peaceful life too. These two influences on Thorfin nearly tear him apart, as his father is not the only person he ends up caring about and learning from, and the other one aligns strongly with the dominant philosophy of violence within their society. Vinland is a story about violence versus pacifism, but more importantly, it's a story that seeks to find just how far empathy can go. It also deals heavily with how to navigate the often conflicting traditions passed down to us, and how to view those who embrace the ideals we have rejected. Number 24, Kumiko Omi from Hibike Euphonium. It's a show about a high school band. The setting is perfect though, both playing an instrument and specifically doing so at a time when you have to think about what you're going to do with your life is a terrifying thing. Even if you put in all the work you possibly can, you might just not be good enough. And then you wasted all this time and energy on something that has only resulted in your failure and misery. When you really try and dedicate yourself to something, it stings so much worse if you fail. The fear of that immobilizes Kumiko. However, she does end up joining her high school's band anyway, and struggles with this immensely. Season 1 focuses on this conflict of not wanting to try because failing will hurt so much more in the context of the band, but Season 2 takes it a step further and applies it to how Kumiko treats and views the people in her life. She is terrified of being hurt, so she doesn't not even want to try to be happy, because failure hurts so much more when you try. Why bother investing in yourself and relationships? Number 23, Mikasa Ackerman from Attack on Titan. Oh yeah, this is probably my most controversial take here, but she is the heart and soul of the story. Attack on Titan is about living in a world much like our own, one that robs us of our agency by putting us at the mercy of powers greater than ourselves, feeding us propaganda so we don't even know what's real, and selling us a value system that says the only way to avoid this is to be the greater power that gets to control reality. It's eat or be eaten. This is not all that different from a standard action show. But what sets it apart is that Attack on Titan is always criticizing this philosophy. We watch as Eren goes down a path that is literally much like a traditional hero. But in the tonal landscape of Attack on Titan is horrifying. Mikasa had a similar upbringing as Eren, but she's the one we see questioning everything more, at least in the later parts of the story. She does not lock herself into a predestined script written for her. She sees Eren's actions and she loves Eren. She hates Eren, and she's just like Eren. The whirlwind of thoughts surrounding Attack on Titan's themes run through Mikasa, and it is through her that we see the story come to its most impactful conclusion. Number 22, Yu Honda from Love Exposure. I'm going to give another warning, similar to the one I did for Monogatari last video, though I wouldn't say Love Exposure, it's quite as painful to watch. The main character is an upskirt photographer. So yeah, he's not at all a good person, and it can be very uncomfortable to watch him do this. I don't want to throw anyone into this movie unprepared, so just putting that out there. With that being said, he is a fantastic arc about the foundations of our romantic values. He is brought up Catholic and is told by his mother shortly before her death that he must find a bride like the Virgin Mary. Due to his upbringing, he is sexually repressed, which, along with this quest to find his Virgin Mary, results in him developing a severe and oddly literal case of the Madonna whore complex. If you're unfamiliar, this refers to when men can only view women as the embodiment of purity or as a whore not deserving of their respect. Typically because the only way they have been openly brought up to see and interact with women is as these sacred beings that need protection, while any women that do not fit this view are shamed by society. Also, having their own sexuality shunned as impure leaves it to manifest in extremely unhealthy and violent ways, especially given the societal context. Quick side note, I do not mean to imply that sex workers do not deserve respect, but rather that rampant misogyny and puritanical values lead many people to wrongfully look down on them, especially the women. I could do a whole video on my thoughts towards sex work, but that'll have to be for another time, if ever. Anyway, Love Exposure explores both sides of Yu's Madonna whore complex. We see how projecting some idealized image of purity or womanhood or really anything onto a complex, multifaceted, real human person is not only unfair to them, but also leads someone like Yu Honda to horribly mistreat them because of his unhealthy obsession with this ideal. Conversely, we see how Yu completely objectifies and disregards the humanity of all other women because of this. While I do prefer Yu, it is worth noting that Love Exposure is not only about him. There is another fantastic lead, Yoko, the girl Yu obsesses over, who was honestly not far off from making this list. Her arc deals with similar ideals, but from the perspective of someone brought up to desire a man. We see her struggle with the ideas of romance that were instilled within her in an attempt to make her compatible with the men society creates. Like you. Not like you, but Yu Honda. I hope it's not like you. Don't be like Yu Honda. She wants a savior, but the fact that someone like Yu Honda who wants to be that for her is disgusting, makes her question what we are told about love, much like Yu does. Number 21, Jacopo Berazati from The House in Fata Morgana. Woo! First Fata character. Jacopo has committed heinous acts, pretty much all of them. He is a deeply flawed person, but as with any Fata Morgana character, he is written with a sense of humanity that can make us understand even some of the most despicable things humans can do. Understand, though, not excuse. I think there's a big distinction there. Oftentimes, I fear that other characters, like Michael Corleone or Don Draper, who are terrible people, but are also so thoughtfully fleshed out, help people to justify their behavior by showing it so faithfully represented on screen. While I love Michael and Don for their humanity paired with their arc's condemnations of their behavior and steps they take toward reform, I often fear that many others enjoy these characters because they feel their worst aspects are being validated by seeing them. And I guess it's easy to ignore the point of these characters' arcs when it is most explicitly shown for a short time at the end. People who really like Jacopo, like a lot, I mean, like I like him a lot, but like, you know, I fear sometimes they can have this problem with him, but I often suspect that that is because people rarely even finish his story. A Requiem for Innocence is a prequel to The House in Fata Morgana that focuses on Jacopo, but that ends with a similarly short realization to the ones Michael and Don stories end with. What makes Jacopo stand out for me is Reincarnation, the final entry into the House in Fata Morgana franchise. Building off of everything established in A Requiem for Innocence, the story of all of Jacopo's mistakes and how a once good person could possibly make them, Reincarnation is not only the story of his guilt, but also his genuine change. We've all made mistakes and hurt others, and seeing Jacopo's full story is so powerful because it doesn't say that even Jacopo can be redeemed so you're excused, but rather that there is a lot of work that goes into changing how you view yourself with your guilt, mending your relationships while tackling the near impossible task of being fair to those you have wronged and not just doing it for yourself, and making absolutely sure you never make the same mistake again. The worse the mistakes you've made are, the more work there is, but even for someone as despicable as Jacopo, putting in the work is worth it. Number 20, Guts from Berserk. If you like grounded character drama centered around dealing with trauma, but somehow haven't read Berserk, go do that. In the beginning of the story, Guts appears to be an edgy, stoic anti-hero. He doesn't talk much, he's aggressive, and he doesn't even let his elf friend touch him. Oh, and he won't even call him a friend. Soon, these traits that make him so cool are revealed to be responses to trauma. There is certainly some commentary on how these behaviors shouldn't be considered cool, but the real heart of the story is the very human character of Guts, trying to live despite his whole life being constant suffering. Berserk is a little different from the other stories I've talked about here in that it is not nearly as dialogue heavy. I love how we use words to express such complex things, but while Berserk's prose is great, much of the impact comes from the art. Emotions such as rage are perfectly captured in Guts' facial expressions, as well as the atmosphere built by the dark fantasy backgrounds that accompany them. More complex emotions and changes in those emotions are also conveyed through Berserk's art, but you really just have to read it. Number 19, Nana Komatsu from Nana. Often called Hachi by her friends, Komatsu is a pretty normal girl who has lofty ideals of a perfect romance. She's quick to fall in love and is no stranger to heartbreak. Getting out of her high school relationship with an older businessman, she is soon to fall in love with another boy. He moves to Tokyo but doesn't want her to come along because he feels she's too dependent on him. In an attempt to prove him wrong, she moves to Tokyo on her own, where she meets and soon befriends another woman named Nana. This Nana is everything Hachi wants in a man. Their friendship has Hachi questioning the ideals that led her to toxic relationships, as well as what makes for a genuine human connection. Is Nana everything Hachi wants, or everything Hachi wants to be? How do you balance being independent with having important bonds? What are the dangers of how we sell the idea of romance to young girls? If you like character arcs that happen very gradually and continuously, you'll love Hachi. Number 18, the maid from the house in Fata Morgana. Not saying anything about her, it's all spoilers. Number 17, BoJack Horseman from BoJack Horseman. A quick summary is kinda impossible, because BoJack covers so many different themes and weaves them together flawlessly. The central question he asks is, am I a good person? But this leads to so much more to explore. The question questions the idea that someone could be wholly good or bad when asked about someone as complex as BoJack. It forces us to consider how cyclical familial trauma makes it a very difficult question to answer. It runs down the rabbit hole of how substance abuse ties into the question of accountability. It explores why someone would care about morality only insofar as how they are perceived rather than how their actions affect others. It suggests that maybe too many people only want to do good so they can feel good about themselves and not out of a genuine desire because they need something to compensate for their lack of self-worth. It does all this with an extraordinary level of nuance to allow BoJack to be a sympathetic and understandable character, while also not excusing his reprehensible behavior. With that, I suppose the final thing it asks is, can we change? Number 16, Sakura Kinomoto from Cardcaptor Sakura. Cardcaptor Sakura is about love. There are so many different kinds of love: romantic love, platonic love, familial love, and a bunch more depending on how specific you want to get. The cast is huge, allowing them to present almost every type of love imaginable. And at the center of this is Sakura. This is a show about her being exposed to all these different kinds of love while trying to sort out her own emotions. Kids are indoctrinated into traditional ideas of love very early, but Sakura isn't fully entrenched in this yet. She has romantic feelings for a boy much too old for her, but she also has all different kinds of love for the various people in her life. What makes her love for this boy romantic? Why does she feel this way? How different is this from the love of other people that she feels? Can new friendships she forms turn into romantic love? These may seem like questions with very simple answers to adults, but I'd argue they aren't. We adults take a lot of ideas for granted because we have often already accepted the dominant notion of society. But these ideas may be flawed, and when they aren't, it's still flawed to just accept them blindly. By focusing on characters at an age before this admission has happened, we get a much more nuanced process of coming to these conclusions than would have otherwise been possible. If you want to skip any and all spoilers, no matter how minor, skip 20 seconds. If I am unclear, neither I nor the show think Sakura should be with someone too old for her. There are some questionable age gaps in the show, but at least in my reading, we watched how Sakura struggles with and eventually overcomes how this impacts her own feelings. Good? Good. Number 15, Anti-Himemiya from Revolutionary Girl Utena. The plot of Utena centers on a series of sword duels that are a part of a game to decide who will gain the power to revolutionize the world. The duels are over a prize known as the Rose Bride that is somehow connected to this power. Anthe is the Rose Bride. She is always engaged to the current victor of these duels, and when her betrothed loses, her engagement is transferred to the new victor. She does everything her fiancé wants and never even shows the slightest discomfort. She seems to do this willingly. Her story focuses on agency, coercion, abuse, and if the allegorical weight of the Rose Bride isn't clear, the indoctrination of young girls into a system that oppresses them. There is a lot more, but I already feel like I've said too much, even though I only covered stuff in episode 1. Just watch it now. Number 14, Gintiki Sakuta from Gintama. Gintama does what almost every story tries and fails to do. It is a show that spends most of its runtime focused on having fun, and somewhere along the way, you grow attached to the characters enough for the bits and pieces of actual story elements throughout as well as the grand finale to actually resonate. This is the formula for so many action and comedy movies. This is what most sitcoms try to do. I rarely find works like this moving, but Gintama had me crying so much and so often. What sets Gintama apart and lets the drama feel like it belongs is that it is aware of it at all times. The characters have large personalities, but each one is constructed on the foundation of their life experiences. The comedic dynamics work, but they work for reasons greater than just the comedy. Even in its goofiest moments, Gintama's cast feels tight-knit because of the genuine connections formed between these characters as people, not as just comedic personalities. Everyone in Gintama is dealing with loss so great that it makes them feel empty. Slowly, we watch as the characters form bonds with one another because of their mutual understanding of each other's emotions and experiences that inform who they are. The community that is formed through all of these connections is beautiful. At the center of it is Gintiki, who I can't actually talk about much in particular because the mystery of his character slowly unravels over the course of the show. Much like the characters in the show do, we form our connection with Gintiki organically. We don't find out everything there is to know about him immediately, but we always see how everything in his life has shaped him. With each interesting action he takes, we become more curious to find out why he is the way he is. Soon, we find ourselves so interested in him and every little thing he does. Before we know it, we care deeply about this person, which makes whatever's left of his arc when you become this attached a moving experience that will be filled with tears. Every Gintama character feels human like this to some extent, which makes it even easier to get attached to Gin, as his relationships with the other characters feel just as genuine as the relationship we form with him. Number 13, Shinobu Oshino from Monogatari. As an immortal vampire, her very existence is a never-ending source of pain for others. There's really not much more I can say for her setup. At some point, even the best people will hurt someone else, and that can really impact our sense of self-worth. Why should we exist if we are bound to cause the people we love the most to suffer? Should we suppress ourselves and our individuality to try to avoid this? Should we embrace the pain we cause others by developing the egotistical idea that we deserve to inflict it? These are all explored through Shinobu's vampirism, but also in more grounded avenues. My favorite moments from her are about dealing with an ex who wants her back, while she already has a new partner. This complicated storm of emotions and indecision may seem like it could be a good story, but unrelated to being an immortal vampire. However, they are woven perfectly together through Shinobu's constant conflict with hurting others just by existing and being herself. In this love triangle she finds herself in, the only paths she can see are deserving to do whatever she wants with no regard for the other's feelings, or doing anything she can to not hurt these two people she cares about, even though that's impossible if she's going to live her life. She doesn't want to live a life where she hurts others, though. How can she move forward? Number 12, Shiro Emiya from Fate Stay Night. As a child, Shiro watched his entire city, including everyone he ever knew, burn to ash in a massive fire. The only reason he's still alive is because of the heroism of the man who saved him and would later become his father. Shiro has crippling survivor's guilt because of all this. Why him? Why was he the only one that gets to live? The only reason is because his new father saved him. Especially now that his dad has passed away, Shiro feels wrong for being alive. To combat this feeling, he fully embraces the value of heroism, the reason he's alive. He vows to become a hero himself. He constantly helps others, often at his own expense. When he discovers a supernatural battle in his city, he's eager to join and save as many people as possible from the worst outcomes of the larger war. This probably sounds like the most generic story ever, and that's intentional. Fate Stay Night is an exploration of just how unhealthy Shiro's mindset is, and therefore how harmful stories that glorify similar ones are. It explores the toll it takes and will take on him. It explores how looking at people as objects to save prohibits genuine human connection. It questions if our worth is really just what we do for others, and if it's not, what exactly is it? Number 11, Toru Honda from Fruits Basket. Another character who's very hard to talk about without spoilers. Toru lost her mom 1 year before the story begins. This isn't a story about the initial stages of grief, but rather about the long-lasting effects of it. Is it even possible to move on? Toru also meets a very strange family, one who has several members who turn into animals when hugged by a member of the opposite sex. Yes, it is very goofy and is the source of a lot of comedy, but we and Toru see how each of these characters deal with how isolating this is. For example, the boys all have strained relationships with their mothers. The series talks about how traumatic it is for the mother to hold her newborn only for it to turn into something inhuman. Their relationships are never repaired from that point on. Aside from just their mothers, they have to keep this all a secret, so they make sure not to form close enough relationships where anything resembling a hug might happen even by accident with anyone outside of each other? Toru somehow becomes the exception and gets to know them all. After growing to care about them, she seeks to unravel the mystery of why they have such a strange affliction. I won't get too into it because spoilers, but we see similarities between this curse that weighs on them related to clinging to their toxic family and Toru's grief that weighs on her. Fruits Basket is a story of how to view past relationships and how to possibly form new ones when those of the past consume so much of you. Number 10, Johnny Joestar from Steel Ball Run. Once a successful jockey, Johnny Joestar is now completely paralyzed from the waist down after being shot, and is now wandering aimlessly through life. Between his disability and the childhood trauma he experienced at the hands of his father, Johnny feels like he is far behind the starting line of life. He frequently says he wants to get back to zero. He randomly encounters Gyro Zappelli, who has really nice balls. After Johnny touches Gyro's balls, his legs twitch just a little. In hopes of being able to walk again, Johnny starts following Gyro around to learn about Gyro's magical balls. In the process, we see them becoming friends, as they both deal with the types of masculinity they have inherited from their fathers. As we talked about in the last video, Gyro develops a much healthier view on masculinity, which influences Johnny and how he views himself, what this scale he wants to get back to the zero of is, and how to view his father, Gyro, and the President of the United States. It is through Johnny that Steel Ball Run's exaggerated but nuanced exploration of fatherhood finds its most powerful conclusions, tying together changing expressions of masculinity, questioning the virtue of patriotism, Christianity, dealing with abusive fathers, and learning to decide the path you wish to take in life. Johnny's arc is truly something special. Number 9, Nauta Nandaba from FLCL. Nauta looks up to his brother as the ideal of masculine maturity. His brother does not actually appear in the story, though. He is gone, having left his now ex-girlfriend behind to go play baseball in America. His presence still looms over Nauta. He loves his brother and tries to be like him. He has this incredibly toxic relationship with his brother's ex, and that is just one of his brother's roles he tries to fill. However, a mysterious woman forces her way into his life, and he is smitten. She reminds him of his brother filling these ideals so much better than he can. Now, having a competitor in meeting these ideals, Nauta is pushed to his limits and is forced to question just how much he is stifling his own individuality to do so. Also, his feelings for this girl shift the power dynamic he expects from romance, from seeing how much power his brother has over his ex, making him often feel emasculated, leading him to compensate by further stifling his own individuality. Speaking of that power dynamic, during all this, Nauta is also growing closer to his brother's ex. He sees just how much his brother has hurt her, and how much he hurts her when he tries to emulate his brother. With all of this happening simultaneously, Nauta is forced to question his worldview. Are masculinity and maturity really ideals he should strive for? Or are they the source of the malaise that defines his town where nothing amazing happens? Number 8, Musashi Miyamoto from Vagabond. Musashi, the most renowned samurai, grew up in a small village, but even from there, he could see the violent values of society. His father was instrumental in instilling the value of strength as the most important thing into Musashi. When you're punished for being weak and only ever praised even a little for being strong, it would be impossible for this to not shape how you view yourself. Musashi sets out from this village in pursuit of being the strongest, to be unrivaled under heaven. This is a story about masculinity. Musashi's father passed down the masculinity he learned to Musashi as young boys learn masculinity. Dominance and strength are central tenets of this philosophy, and they only get reinforced when a young boy like Musashi steps out into the world and sees that it is ruled by these all too familiar values. Musashi, whether it be because of his father's abuse or just the existential dread of being alive, feels the need to justify his existence. And the only way he has seen someone be valued is when they're a strong man. So he ventures out to prove he is worthy of life by successfully performing masculinity. Throughout the story of him wandering around alone looking for stronger people to kill, he questions his quest, but it is when we reach the Yoshioka massacre that everything changes. If you want to avoid any and all spoilers, you can skip to the timestamp on the screen. Sure, right? But this is historical fiction. So these spoilers are more akin to if you were watching a show about the French Revolution and someone told you that the king dies. With that being said, Musashi is known as the best samurai ever because he won a sword fight against 70 swordsmen at once. He did it. He became the strongest. Nobody could possibly contest that. So what? What now? After this event is when Vagabond becomes something truly special. Musashi has lived his entire life as a swordsman and has only now realized that the manhood that was forced upon him won't give him what he's looking for. From this point on, we watch as he struggles against his old habits, but more importantly, we watch him search for an identity that he can exist comfortably within. Is it possible to reform his definition of masculinity to the point where it becomes something to help him find the fulfillment he deserves instead of leading him astray? Number 7, Akari Mizunashi from Aria. She is the biggest outlier on this list. Today we have talked about depressed people, terrible people, and terrible depressed people. And don't worry, there's more of that coming. But we're taking a quick break. Aria takes place in the idyllic city of Neo Venezia, a near-exact replica of modern-day Venice on a future terraformed Mars. Akari is training to be a gondolier tour guide under her mentor who she loves. She spends most of her days spending time with her close friends as they hone their skills, strengthen their bonds, and grow closer to the city they live in. She has a wonderful life, and she is very happy. Aria is an incredibly relaxing show, and many people like it just for that. If you have gotten this far in the video, you might be wondering where the doom and gloom is. The answer to that is that it's always there, just under the surface. How can she be completely happy, knowing that the source of her happiness will, no matter what, disappear? She will become an adult and no longer have the same relationship with her mentor. Her friends will go off and have their own lives. Her city may even change. When all this happens, will she still be happy? This anxiety over the future is a universal experience. Everyone goes through this at some point, and Aria is able to get to the heart of it so well that, for me, it is applicable in areas it doesn't even cover. This show has helped me process not only moving through life, but also the dread of death. I don't want to misrepresent it, though. It is a very cute show about friends having fun in a really wholesome setting. But there's definitely a lot of meaning that is imbued within it. Number 6, Morgana from the House in Fata Morgana. And back to miserable people. Morgana has so much hate for everyone she knows. I cannot get too into it because of spoilers, but I will say that everyone she has ever loved in her entire life has wronged her to such an extent that pretty much anything she could do to them would be understandable. She is spiteful and hateful, but she is also a traumatized girl who deeply loves these same people. Dealing with her conflicting emotions alongside the horrors of what she experienced is written in such a way where we see every painstaking detail in her most pivotal moments. Between that and the carefully constructed relationships that we as the audience have no choice but to be invested in, even when it feels wrong. We are brought through her journey as a person in a way that no other character I've talked about before has done. Before in like this video, where, there's more coming. There's better, there's better things coming. Number 5, Koyomi Araragi from Monogatari. Well, I've brought him up several times already in the context of how he's ruined the other characters' lives and how terrible he is, but we finally made it to the main character of Monogatari. He's certainly terrible. But I guess if you haven't figured it out by now, all characters on this list get better in some way or another. So it is this journey that lands him so high. I hate him for his starting point, but how he gets to a point of being truly empathetic and living on is beautiful. Somewhere between Shiro Emiya and BoJack Horseman in his conflict, Araragi wants desperately to be the hero because that is what his conception of a good person is. And due to his own failures earlier in life that are explored later on in the series, Araragi feels worthless. By playing the hero, not only does he get to feel like a good person and therefore worthwhile, but he also develops quite the ego that manifests in truly sinister ways. When he is constantly interacting with people he views only as objects to save and not as people really at all. Throughout the story, we see Araragi grow to actually understand the people he supposedly saved, and in doing so realize the flaws in the role he wished to play. His arc questions our notions of morality and how we are taught a version of it consisting of certain rules. It turns being a good person into a game where the winners are glorified, and therefore those who seek glory try to be moral by just following the system. Throughout Monogatari, we watch Araragi's conception of morality as a game break down, and rebuild a system based on understanding and empathy in its place. Going further, without having the title of hero or good person or whatever, Araragi must confront his own failures and self-loathing and perhaps extend some of that caring to himself. Number 4, Michel Bolingier from The House in Fata Morgana. I am so sorry for doing this to you so late, but I really can't say anything because of spoilers. I will say that if any of my top 6 sound interesting to you in the slightest, then you will love Michel. Number 3, Shinji Ikari from Neon Genesis Evangelion. I'm gonna sound so corny. There's a story that rings in the heart of every young boy. It comes in many forms, and I've seen it a lot. We show every kid perceived as a boy stories of becoming great men. These stories feature a man or boy finding himself in a situation where he must fight. A situation with the opportunity for greatness. When he wins the fight and saves the world, he is rewarded with the adoration of humanity and any woman he desires. It's a good story, but there are a few problems. Being force-fed stories that glorify stoicism, view women as prizes to be won, and show the path to happiness as successfully completing the task the world gives you, conditions the mind to be chewed up and spit out by the world. Stoicism only leads to being emotionally stunted and unable to know what true happiness will be like or form meaningful relationships. This view of women is obviously really bad. It makes you hurt those around you and obviously prevents having a healthy romantic relationship if you desire one with a woman. And then, succeeding in the task given to you by the world can't even temporarily prop up your emotionally stunted self when all society wants from you is to be another cog in the machine that generates profits for someone else and does not allow the common folk to rise into the upper echelon of society we see getting that glory our childhood heroes got. So what is there to be done when the stories that taught you how to live set you up for failure in life? Well, many people who find themselves here will withdraw to the comfort of the stories they grew up on, usually as an audience member, but sometimes as an author. These stories are familiar, they make sense, and at least you can get a taste of that satisfaction you were promised. This only makes the problem worse. It does nothing to change how you live your life and only reinforces the outlook that is preventing your happiness. Neon Genesis Evangelion is a conscious revisit with this all too familiar story. We open up to a monster wreaking havoc on a city and a young boy trying to navigate his way to find his estranged father who has summoned him. When they finally reunite, His father tasks him with piloting a skyscraper-sized robot to save the city and the world from this monster. This, of course, sounds familiar to you, and the rest of the show follows in much of the ways you would expect, with Shinji saving the city from a new monster every week while the mystery of the world slowly unravels. What sets Evangelion apart can be seen immediately in the first episode. Shinji does pilot the robot, but he breaks down because of it. He is pressured to do his job without ever getting to process the stress of it, let alone his abandonment issues surrounding his father. He is seen for the first time in 3 years. He is pressured into the stoicism these kinds of stories typically glorify, and it takes a toll. We also see him treating the women in his life with the same perspective as any other action hero would, but here, just how disgusting it is unobscured. We feel pain as he hurts characters we care about, and ones that we know he could have more fulfilling connections with if he was better. We feel his pain as he runs in circles from getting a crumb of praise from piloting and thinking he can sustain himself on that, to running away because he can't handle it all anymore, and back to wanting another crumb because he is nothing else. He is the same as the audience member I described earlier, who is trapped in a cycle of being rejected by the world in part because of their shitty values that these types of stories instilled into them, to seeking crumbs of satisfaction from these stories or their shitty jobs, and back to being rejected. Shinji balances his own narrative with the twin meta-narratives of the experience of creating the show and of watching it, to fully explore this vicious cycle, and perhaps through some of the most intense and detailed introspection I have ever seen put to screen, find a way out. Number 2, Utsanatenjo from Revolutionary Girl Utena. If Evangelion is about how stories meant for young boys fail them, then Utena is about how our stories for young girls are also failures. But it is, of course, so much more. We don't get the details until much later, but as a child, Utena's parents died and she had no will to continue living. That is, until she was saved by a prince. This archetypal man gave her a reason to live and asked her to find him when she is older. This totally cute story that is totally not foreshadowing of any grooming that goes on has a bit of a twist, though. Also, probably don't watch Utena if you're not okay watching really messed up stuff. Utena does vow to find her prince, but also admires him so much that she swears to be just like him. Utena's contradictory goals of being a prince and being her prince's princess allows the story to explore how a person is affected by each of the 2 traditional gender roles, the deception of how they're sold to us through fairy tales, and what it feels like to be in conflict about your gender. Take that and tie in pretty much everything I said about Araragi earlier, and you have Utena. Utena is in conflict with her gender, given how different parts of herself draw her to different sides of the gender binary, but she needs the prince role, much like Araragi needs the hero role to justify her existence. The prince is loved, the prince has a legacy, something that will last forever, unlike her time with her parents. However, Utena is on both sides of the role, experiencing both the hollow satisfaction it grants those who fill it and the oppression it forces on those who do not. Perhaps she has yet to find out what awaits those who are neither princes or princesses in the way society wants them to be. Also, what if someone's problems are far more complex than can be solved simply by a prince coming to the rescue? Will she care at that point? And finally, number 1, Ange Ushiromiya from Umineko When They Cry. Okay, so I actually can't say anything about Ange with no spoilers. I can, however, say a good amount if I can spoil the first 1/8 of Umineko. That is 17 hours though, so if you would rather not hear it, then thank you so much for watching. It really means a lot, actually. If you want to go the extra mile of showing support, then give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment telling me what you thought, share the video anywhere you can, and check out our link tree in the description. With that being said, if you've stuck around, it is time for some Umineko spoilers. When Ange was 6 years old, her whole family went to their annual family conference, a place where the adults talked about serious stuff, but for Ange it was all about having fun with her cousins, especially Maria, who was the closest in age to Ange, about 9 years old. They would play together as witches in their society of witches helmed by the legendary witch of the island this conference took place on, Beatrice. Ange would miss these fun days of playing pretend at age 6 because she had a stomachache and couldn't go to the conference that year. Her entire family died at that conference. She lost everyone at 6 years old. Living would never be the same, but she floated through life, all while the public speculated on what could have possibly happened to the 18 people who mysteriously died. In her days at school, Ange was a lonely child after this. She obviously struggled to form new relationships, but on top of that, rumors of how horrible the Ushiromiya family was and theories on which one of them murdered everyone were parroted into Ange's ear. No one wanted to be her friend. So she spent her days alone, reading Maria's diary, trying to reconnect with what she had lost. But just as everyone's speculations complicated Ange's grief by making it impossible to look at her family she loves as the nice people she thought they were, reading Maria's words while older makes it clear that Maria was being abused by her mother. It forces Ange to think about how during the only time she has ever been happy, Maria was suffering. Maria seems happy though. She enjoys spending her days with her magical friends, at least according to her diary. That's how she spent most of her days. In some ways, this comforts Ange to be brought back to the days when her and Maria could play as witches together. But it is also deeply saddening to question if Maria's happiness was just a delusion. This question defines Ange's teenage years. Could Maria, in her isolation, really be happy while suffering so much? If so, why can't Ange do it? If not, though, is Ange doomed to a life of misery in her own isolation? When Ange is 18, she decides to find the truth of what exactly happened on that island the day her life was ruined. And once she does, she will kill herself. That is the very beginning of Ange's story. I do not want to spoil anything, but I at least find her setup very interesting. Where does happiness come from? Is it all a delusion in a cruel world? The answer is no, by the way. Play Umineko. Seriously. And with that, we are done. That has been my top 50 characters. Thank you so much for watching. I know I said it earlier, but like, comment, share, subscribe, follow the link in the description. It's all greatly appreciated. If you made it this far, you're amazing.